welcome everyone to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammie. Hi there, Cammie.
Hi, Bryant. How are you?
I'm excellent. I don't know if it's 100% sure. Maybe I should have clicked that, but I think this is like the 1 year anniversary episode. Is that right? Almost.
It might be.
Is it end
It
of
might be the week
September?
before. It's September 17th or 16th is our 1 year. So
Right. We're like basically there. This will
yeah,
go up like in that area. So happy 1 year anniversary.
happy anniversary.
We're not in a tiny little closet at a university trying to talk about the Minotaur right now. It's a little different today. So if you're just joining us, though, well, welcome. Mythstorie is a show that Cammie and I started a year ago where we like to talk about all sorts of different myths and legends, and we will do that by kind of giving you that myth and legend, kind of a tale. Cammie will kind of condense it, and then I will try and give you some of the history or story or a little bit more information behind it. Like today is a great idea or an interesting sort of thing, especially for my end. Sometimes for Cammie, it's hard for her to like find a story out of something. Like we're having a problem with one topic right now, kind of. But today we're
One topic that we've
discuss...
already announced, so
I know,
it's even worse.
I know. You'll see soon though.
It's okay. I found a tablet. It'll be fine.
But the Children of Lear is the Irish legend that we're talking about today. And this is funny too because when I go in, the information behind it it's a little different. I was expecting to hear about stories and things like that and tablets, Irish tablets, but no, there were no Irish tablets back then with this on it. But yeah, so Cammie, why don't you go ahead and give us this story?
Okay, great. Thank you. I would like to thank Debbie, who is a very active member of our Facebook group, for the pronunciations. I hope I do them justice. She is from Ireland, so she helped me out.
Oh yeah, and I was looking. I had a good source for those, and it just reminded me if you didn't listen to our Welsh mythology episode where we talked about Annwn, we already butchered a lot of this, and the like traditional like Irish and Welsh are very similar in that they're incredibly hard to pronounce. So yeah, do forgive us though on that. And Cammie, I'm rooting for you on this because
I'm gonna try my best. I'll be super embarrassed if I don't get it right. I won't be.
Right, no.
So my source though was irishatheart.com, the story of Children of Lear by Mary Moore. Long ago in Ireland, a king, known for his kindness and fair rule, wanted to gain the allegiance of one of his harshest critics. The king offered his daughter, Eve, in marriage to this man, who went by the name of Lear. Lear was won over by the fair woman, and they both fell passionately in love. The two had 4 beautiful children, Fionnuala, Aed, Fiachra, and Con. But Eve died suddenly in the night, and the children were left without a mother. The king was fond of his grandchildren and new son-in-law, so he offered his other daughter, Aoife, to Lear for marriage. She was happy to agree, and the two seemed to get along well, but Aoife was a jealous woman, and under the guise of taking the children to see their grandfather one night, she instead went to Loch Dorroch and meant to slay the children with a sword she had carried along the journey. When she went to strike them, she couldn't do it, so she took out her wand and performed a spell, turning them into beautiful swans. But she made one horrible mistake. She left them with their voices. They pleaded with her to turn them back, but she refused, saying that they were now doomed for 900 years. 300 they would spend in Loch Dorroch, then 300 in Shrok Nom Weo, and 300 in Inish Gloria. After that, they would be free when they heard the bells of the Christian church. Aoife went to see her father without the children, and he demanded her to give their whereabouts. She tried to say they were at home with their father, but he saw through a ruse. He sent word to Lear that the children were missing, and Lear himself went to look. He could hear their beautiful singing when he neared the loch, but he saw no children, only swans. They called to him, and he realized they had been turned by witchcraft. They relayed what their stepmother had done to them, and how they were doomed for 900 years to live as birds. Lear visited them every day until his death, and 300 years passed. The children were then washed to their next destination. This place was cold and lonely, but they huddled together and kept each other company for another 300 years. Finally, they reached their last destination. This place was lonelier than the first. They only met a few fishermen during their sentence, but 300 years passed just the same. Finally, they awoke one morning to find they could leave the lake, still as swans, but they were free nonetheless. They traveled to their old home, which was gone. So was everything they remembered from their lives. They were disheartened until one day a kind stranger came upon them. He said he was working with St. Patrick to spread Christianity through the land. He taught them the ways of God and how to be good Christian swans. It wasn't long before another man heard of these children, a king. He wanted them as a wedding present to his bride. The monk tried to protect them, but the king grabbed at them, and just then, as he did, the bells of the newly erected church filled the air, and these swans became children again. But they aged rapidly, and they cried for the monk to baptize them so they might go in peace. They hurried to the loch, and he baptized them in the waters. And then they withered and died just after, joining their family in heaven.
Oh,
Yeah,
love it.
yeah, it's like sweet but sad.
Yeah. No, that's a good way of putting it. So this was interesting to look into, and I saw a lot of familiar things. So we've talked about specifically this time a year ago, almost, Banshees was an early episode we did. That was a really fun concept because like we knew we were aware of Banshees, but it has some things with it and it evolved. We've talked about the Welsh mythology aspect and a few other things relative to the British Islands and mythology and things like that. And some of this comes up, but this story is a little different. I was sort of expecting like a more direct thing, like a direct piece of evidence or something like that. But what's funny is, I mean, when I started my research, I found an old website that I used for the Banshee episodes, CelticWeddingsRings.com. I loved that. Like this website like this about wedding rings is like, by the way, here I'm your source on mythology. So I looked at that and IrishatHeart.com, Ask About Ireland, Irish Central, all these great websites that are very like, you know, there is such this calling, especially for Americans and non-Irish, and I'm sure Irish natives, to find out more about this stuff. But you imagine with Irish Americans, it's kind of a calling home thing. Anyway, this is my roundabout saying of I was expecting something like a deeper connection. You know, like Banshees kind of came to America, and it was this kind of like local ghost thing, even in America in like the 40s, I think it was. This story is a little different, and it's rooted no further really than the 12th century. It's a medieval legend. It's a medieval tale, and it doesn't necessarily have like 100% Irish roots. It kind of was localized and incorporated, it seems like. And especially this was the time too that this was 600 years into really the Christianization of the British Isles. And it's very clear, I mean, from your story, that's what the story, like, you know, I love how to be good Christian swans. Like, how do you be a good Christian swan? But that we, you know, not to reiterate what I've talked about a lot, but that was a really important part of the formation. And like we just talked about with New Orleans voodoo, about how voodoo and Catholicism mixed up a couple weeks ago. That was what happened in Ireland, but over the course of centuries and centuries. And this is a cool story because swans do have like an important history, and they're beautiful. They are, you know, known for having their mates for life. They have tons of they're called Ella. That's what it's, the Ella in Irish, I believe. That's what my ConnollyCove.com told me. And so, and they are kind of featured in certain things, but so this was kind of an interesting one though, because it was a little different. There was a punishment. The swans weren't just 100%. It wasn't 100% great for the swans here, obviously, but Yeah, so I think a lot of too. The other one I didn't mention that we did was the Loch Ness monster, and that was a fun one because there were references to a monster in that lake for a long time, but then like the solving, like the more definitive one has to do with a Christian priest or something, like, or monk. I can't remember exactly which, but taking care of it. He so they didn't deny that there was a monster in the lake. They adapted that so Christianity could kind of take care of it. And I feel like this is likely what happened here. Some of my sources even said that the original story came from like mainland Europe, like even like the Netherlands or France, and like I said, was adapted. Could have been. I know, like, it made me think about how the French really took to Arthurian legend and during the medieval era, and that kind of bounced back and forth, and that's sort of how we get the Lancelot Guinevere of today that we kind of see because of those French people that were so in love with the Arthurian tales. So maybe this is a case, but again, I don't have a source. I don't really have anything to definitively tell you. What I do have is like 18 tabs that tell the story over and over again. It does come in a lot of different ways, though. I mean, if it's a medieval legend, it's it was an oral tradition sort of then, and the legend would be sort of localized, and just as it was localized to Ireland, maybe from France or the Netherlands or wherever it was originally from, if that was the case. But nowadays it does have sort of a standard. The same sort of characters come up, and there are these so the one thing that's sort of talked about is it does take place in ancient Ireland. It has to do with these ancient the people settlers of Ireland called the Tuatha De Danann. It looks nothing. Well, not nothing. It doesn't look like the word says that. It kind of looks like Tuatha, but Tuatha De Danann. And what was cool about these, so these were like an ancient race. This is the first time I think I really run into these characters, these people part of Irish legend.
I saw that too, where it's like it's almost not even like humans is kind of how they describe it. Yeah, like they're kind of maybe not fairy folk, but similar in a way to that.
They were divine pre-humans. It kind of reminded me. I can't. It was one Greek episode we did recently. I think it was with Peter, where I ended up talking about Dactyl Heracles. Do you remember this? It was a different Hercules. He was from the Dactyls. The Dactyls were like pre-Greek. They weren't humans, but they were humanoid deity people before, but they weren't gods. It was kind of weird, but it was evidence of in Greece of these people that were, the race was dactyl, and they were human-like, and they were involved in the world with the cosmos and the gods, but they were separate entities. It was interesting, kind of like, I guess you could say like like the dwarves, the way that the Norse and how kind of we think of dwarves, in Lord of the Rings, and elves, they're a different race. They're human-like, they're related in a lot of ways, but they're clearly different. That's the best way I can talk about the Tuatha De Danann people. So, and then encyclopedia.com, actually, they have a history section. That's probably one of the best sources that I had that kind of clearly talked about this and broke it down and the pronunciations for me. It also talks about how Lear is the god of the sea in Irish and Welsh mythology. And I thought that was really cool. And again, Irish and Welsh mythology, kind of like Norse, there's no exact book. This is all very local. It depends on where you go. The British Islands were subject to tons of invaders and settlers. It went all around. So it's really kind of crazy how many, the different ways. This wasn't like a homogenous thing always. It wasn't always that way. And then again, further, you have the Christianization of it all too. So even if this was like a native Irish story, pre-Christian Ireland, it would have changed with this Christian influence, just like so many other things did. But it's clearly a story that's prevalent. It's been adapted in a lot of different ways now. There's a talk. I mean, King Lear of Shakespeare from the early 1600s. It seems like that could have had a this story could have influenced Shakespeare. I imagine it would have been a story that he heard. I mean, he was extremely well read and would likely have had some way of connecting into that. I mean, he was really into that kind of thing, as well as like the indigenous sort of culture, as well as like Roman and Greek and things like that. So, but again, I don't have, this is just speculation. It could have, there's other than the name, there's really not too much else that we have to go on other than sort of the general morals and things like that of the story that it's trying to tell. And it's a quite an elaborate story, but like when you go to the Wikipedia page, it doesn't say this was written by there's nothing, there's really like my part ends here for the most part. Like I've told you everything I can. The wild thing for me is the impact comes, God, it's sort of like William Tell, where there's like a couple little roots, but the tree is huge. Like the
Right.
impact's huge. There is a ton of statues and sculptures in Ireland dedicated, and it depicts the swans or it depicts the children. Today, modern music kind of goes with it. There's movies and books that have been based off it. Books ever since the late 19th century. Patrick Kennedy, he was a folklorist. He adapted the tale as he called it, the Four Swans, in this collection called the Bardic Stories of Ireland from 1871. So that was like since 1871, it's been going on. But as 1954 in America, there was a modern retelling of it as well. And so it's really cool. I guess it's kind of nice that it doesn't have this strict story to it because it's been able to have been adapted so much. But it's a story of punishment and torment and suffering and love. And you've got a jealous king. You've got it's got a lot in it. It's a very complicated story, and that's why I'm so surprised that there's no direct thing.
You know what it reminds me of
Sure.
is when we were talking about some of the, God, was it Beowulf, where it was almost like Christianity was kind of shoehorned into the story.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
at the
Beowulf.
end?
Yeah, there was the pagan Beowulf story. It had been around way before Christianity, and then it was retold, and they were like, "And God did this," But it was very shoehorned, very very shoehorned.
Yeah, this feels pretty similar. Like maybe it was a tradition before that.
The monk could have. Yeah, he was just thrown in there,
Yeah.
for sure. And I mean, there were, like I don't know if shaman would be the best kind of way to put it, or druid. Druid, I'm pretty sure is a Welsh or Celtic term. I think we've already covered that. Dryd, I think is what it is, and that would be pronounced like druid. So yeah, the original story could have had a druid. I mean, you've got people turning into swans. Like it's really cool. But
I didn't mention this, but Aoife, in the story that I read, her father actually also knew, I guess, like druid magic and that sort of thing, and turned her into, he asked her to say the thing that she feared the most, like what was the scariest thing in the world or whatever. And she said something like night witch or something like that. And he turned her immediately into that. So, I mean, if that's part of the story, that's not Christianity at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. And that actually reminds me of Banshee a little bit. Like, what is a night witch anyway?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. It's cool. Yeah, I mean, basically it follows a lot of what we've talked about before, where there are these sort of there's these clear Irish connections. However, and I didn't know this when I was just kind of reading around, and a lot of the sources didn't even mention this, but Lear is sort of regarded as like a god of the water, but there's not really like a strict pantheon in these mythologies like we would think of in Greek and all that. There's not, it's weird. It's very local, but it just sort of filtered through and became this really strong story with these characters that were always in it and always sort of based around it being in this ancient time period, the Tuatha De Danann being involved. And yeah, I mean, you imagine if they were stuck to be swans for that long, it would cover this nice long period. And I don't know, it's just wild. And it still is getting new books and inspiring things today. I mean, it's extremely important in this period. In fact, God, Peter, he studied, was it just British literature? We've got to bug him about this. We got to ask him.
He's in the mountains. We can't bug him.
I know. But
but Debbie did tell me, she was like, this story, I can't believe you haven't like come across it yet, because this story is, everyone in Ireland knows the story. There's not a person in Ireland that doesn't know it. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, and I asked my mom, my native English woman, so I wouldn't expect her. I mean, there's a chance, she's Welsh and English, and she wasn't super familiar with it. It kind of rang a bell, Lear. You kind of, your head goes to Shakespeare immediately, I think, and then that's kind of it. But it was just really interesting. Like several of the links I found were like this ancient Irish myth, and it's like, well, it seems like it's ancient Irish because it's set in ancient Ireland. But if I create a story and set it in ancient Ireland, it's not ancient Irish myth. That's what I'm kind of. It's like a medieval myth set in ancient Ireland, but like many other sort of parts of these cultures that we're all about oral histories, the story definitely could have predated a lot. It could
being written down. Yeah. Exactly. Almost certainly it predated it being written down.
Right. Yeah. So that's the cool thing. And the influences there, like I said, in the sculptures and then in modern literature from the 19th century and to today. I mean, there's like kids books in the 2000s, or like I would say young adult reader books that are based off of these myths and things like that too. And it's cool. There's a lot you can do with it. It's very flexible. It's very like fairy tale like, but not kind of the same. I mean, we've got some really cool stuff there. I mean, getting turned into the swans, like it definitely has like the 3-act play kind of setup,
yeah, it does.
And there's the 2 kings, and there's I'm supposed to be the king, or I want to be the ruler, and yeah, it's a really rich story. I'm glad that we've touched on it. I just was like really surprised that I found so many websites that were willing to tell me the story, but there really wasn't a huge basis behind it. But again, that helps, I think, make it really open and flexible in the way that you tell it. So yeah, I really liked it. I really did. I kind of like just wanted to look at the footnotes too, and encyclopedia.com did a really good job of giving it, because I wanted to hear your rendition of it, because I had not heard of it before. A lot of this stuff is interesting.
It seems familiar to me, but I don't know. Supposedly, like Swan Lake is based somewhat on this, like the transformation into swans or something. So I might be thinking of that, but as I was reading through, I was like, this does sound kind of familiar, but I didn't really know. Like I didn't know how it was going to end or anything.
It's all these literary elements that are, or in storytelling elements, I think, that are really consistent throughout a lot of stories, and it definitely does that. But no, I hadn't heard of it, but I can think of it's sort of like the apple off the head thing, shooting an apple off the head from William Tell. It's like I remember I've heard of that. Maybe it was a cartoon that did it when I was a kid or something like that. But so it's those tropes, like fairy tale medieval storytelling tropes that kind of went around. And so yeah, well, in short, it is set in ancient Ireland. It probably is an oral history story that did pass on. Lots of different renditions then, though. Lots of localizations, I would imagine. And a lot of these websites admit this. They do say that. They don't really kind of go on beyond that. But yeah, it's a great story. It's influencing today. I didn't see anything that said, and this is the clear connection to Swan Lake, other than swans and transformations and stuff like that. But that isn't a super consistent theme, so that definitely could be it. And just like, I mean, King Lear, these general ideas, these general morals and stories that they're trying to tell. So yeah, it was a really good story. I'm glad that we touched on it. It was cool to go back to Ireland, and it wasn't a ghost trying to destroy you. So this one was a little happier. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Cammie. Thanks, Debbie, for helping us out. Let us know how we pronounce everything. It's tough. It's really tough. But I'm really glad we got to do this. Everyone, let us know what you think. If you were familiar with this, our Facebook group is really active. That's probably the best way to get with us. But you can also watch this on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter too. We'll send out some funny pictures called memes every now and then, and let you know when new episodes post. But yeah, I think that about covers it, Cammie. Thanks for your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bryant.
Excellent. Well, everyone, we will see you next time.
Oh.